Coleco Chameleon. In 2015, retro gaming fans were buzzing about a mysterious new cartridge-based console, the Coleco Chameleon. The pitch was simple: no downloads, no patches, just plug in a game and play. It was supposed to be the spiritual successor to classic systems of the 80s and 90s, built for a modern age that had drifted away from physical media. The team behind it claimed it was already in advanced development, even showing working prototypes at trade shows. But the excitement didn't last. In early 2016, eagle-eyed fans noticed something odd about the hardware displayed at the New York Toy Fair. Inside the transparent casing was an old Super Nintendo Junior motherboard. A later prototype shown online identified as a cheap capture card from a CCTV security system. The so-called revolutionary console was a fraud. As evidence piled up, the project collapsed almost overnight. Coleco, whose name had been licensed for the product, cut all ties. Pre-orders never opened, funding dried up, and the Chameleon became one of the most infamous examples of gaming vaporware. Today, it's remembered less as a lost console and more as one of the greatest scandals in gaming history. Nintendo PlayStation. In the early 90s, Nintendo and Sony were quietly working together on something unheard of: a hybrid console that would play both Super Nintendo cartridges and a brand new format called CD-ROM. The project, nicknamed the Nintendo PlayStation, was meant to give Nintendo a massive leap in storage capacity without abandoning their existing SNES library. Sony's prototype combined the familiar SNES controller ports and cartridge slot with a built-in disk drive, promising bigger games with full motion video, CD quality sound, and faster load times. But behind the scenes, negotiations soared. Nintendo's leadership worried about the terms of Sony's licensing agreement, which would have given Sony too much control over CD-based games. In a stunning move at CES 1991, Nintendo announced on stage that it had partnered with Sony's rival, Philips, effectively blindsiding their original collaborator. Sony, feeling betrayed, scrapped the deal and began developing its own console, the PlayStation, which would go on to dominate the industry. Only a handful of Nintendo PlayStation prototypes were ever made, and for decades, most gamers thought they were just a rumor. That changed in 2015 when one surfaced in working condition. It's now one of the most valuable pieces, a huge what-if that changed the future. Panasonic M2. After the lukewarm performance of the 3DO, Panasonic wasn't ready to give up on the console market. Their follow-up, the M2, was seen as a powerhouse, capable of polygon counts and texture detail far beyond what the original PlayStation or Nintendo 64 could handle. Originally conceived as an add-on for the 3DO, the M2 quickly evolved into a full standalone console, complete with futuristic design, advanced 3D capabilities, and a planned library of high-profile launch titles. Developers who saw early demos were stunned. The M2's hardware promised near arcade quality at home, and Panasonic even teased partnerships with major third-party studios. But there was a problem. The console market was already shifting. By the time the M2 was close to production in the mid-90s, the Sega Saturn and PlayStation were firmly established, and the Nintendo 64 was on the horizon. The risk of launching an expensive, unproven system into a crowded market scared investors. In 1997, Panasonic quietly pulled the plug, repurposing the technology for arcade machines, kiosks, and even medical equipment. No retail M2 units were ever released to the public. Today, only a handful of prototypes remain, a relic of a console that could have been a generational leap if it had made it out the door. I'll be posting here daily, so if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. Atari Panther. By the early 90s, Atari was desperate to recapture the magic of its glory days. After the underwhelming Atari 7800, the company began work on the Panther, a powerful console intended to leapfrog the competition and put Atari back on top. Internally, the system used a Motorola 68000 CPU alongside two custom chips: the Panther graphics processor for handling fast 2D sprites and early 3D effects, and the Ensoniq Otis sound chip for high-quality audio. On paper, it was a serious step up from the Sega Genesis or Super Nintendo, capable of delivering arcade-style visuals at home. Atari's strategy was to launch the Panther around 1991 or 1992, then follow it with an even more advanced machine, the Jaguar, a few years later. But as development went on, the industry's focus began shifting toward more complex 3D graphics, and the Panther's architecture was already starting to look dated. Developers also found the hardware tricky to work with, making it harder to attract strong third-party support. Rather than split its resources, Atari canceled the Panther in 1991 and put all its efforts into fast-tracking the Jaguar. Today, only a few prototypes are known to exist, making the Panther one of the most elusive ghost consoles in Atari's long, turbulent history. Sega Neptune. In the mid-90s, Sega found itself juggling too much hardware at once: the Genesis, the Sega CD, and the ill-fated 32X add-on. To simplify things, Sega devised the Neptune, a sleek all-in-one console that combined the Genesis and 32X into a single, affordable unit. The idea was to give gamers the full 32-bit next-gen experience without the messy stack of hardware that had become a running joke among Sega fans. The Neptune would have eliminated the need for multiple power supplies and tangled cables, while also giving the struggling 32X a second chance at life. Sega even planned to price it aggressively, reportedly aiming for under $200, with some sources putting the target at around $150, significantly cheaper than buying both systems separately. But the timing was brutal. The Sega Saturn was already in development, and executives feared the Neptune would confuse the market or eat into Saturn sales. In 1995, Sega quietly scrapped the project before it ever hit store shelves. Prototypes do exist. At least one is publicly displayed at the National Video Game Museum, and they've become a rare piece for collectors. Looking back, some fans believe that if the Neptune had launched earlier, it might have changed the 32X's legacy entirely. Atari Cosmos. Atari wasn't just experimenting with home consoles in the early 80s, they were also chasing the booming handheld market. Enter the Atari Cosmos, a tabletop portable that looked like a hybrid between a mini arcade cabinet and a futuristic toy. What set it apart was its display. Instead of a simple LCD or LED screen, the Cosmos used holographic images printed on interchangeable cartridges. Each game would project unique 3D-like visuals, creating the illusion of depth while the actual gameplay happened on a basic LED grid beneath the hologram. It sounded revolutionary. No other handheld promised that level of visual flair. Atari even took the Cosmos to trade shows in 1981, showing off prototypes to the press and hyping up a launch lineup that included arcade hits like Asteroids and Space Invaders. But behind the flashy tech was a problem. It didn't actually improve gameplay. The holograms were purely cosmetic, and the underlying LED action was about as advanced as an old electronic tabletop game. When word got out that the holograms didn't interact with the game at all, interest cooled fast. Atari quietly canceled the Cosmos before mass production, making the few prototypes that survived some of the rarest artifacts in gaming history. Philips Odyssey 3. By the early 80s, Magnavox and Philips were preparing to follow up their successful Odyssey 2 with a true next-generation machine, the Philips Odyssey 3, also known as the Odyssey 3 Command Center. The plan was to launch in 1983 with major hardware upgrades, better graphics, richer sound, a sleeker design, and backward compatibility with the Odyssey 2's game library. It was exactly what the company needed to stay competitive against Atari and the incoming wave of Japanese consoles. The Odyssey 3 boasted an improved CPU, more RAM, and support for more complex games with colorful, detailed sprites. Demos showed arcade-style titles and ambitious home software that the Odyssey 2 could never run. Prototypes were built and tested, but the video game market was already shifting, and then the crash of 1983 hit. With retailers drowning in unsold stock and consumer confidence in freefall, Philips decided a US launch was far too risky. The Odyssey 3 never reached American store shelves. However, a closely related system did release in select European markets, offering many of the same upgrades. Today, the Odyssey 3 is remembered as both a victim of bad timing and one of the rarest almost consoles in history. Action Game Master. If there was ever a console concept that sounded too good to be true, it was the Action Game Master. Announced by a company called Active Enterprises, the same group behind the notoriously awful NES game Action 52, this early 90s handheld was pitched as a gaming Swiss Army knife. According to the promotional materials, it would play NES, Super Nintendo, and Sega Genesis games straight out of the box. On top of that, the company promised a CD-ROM add-on, a TV tuner, and even a car adapter for gaming on the go. The problem? None of it ever materialized beyond marketing mock-ups. Making a handheld that could run 3 entirely different systems would have required massive amounts of hardware and licensing deals with 3 rival companies, an almost impossible feat at the time. The proposed CD-ROM drive was to be an external module, not built in, adding even more cost and complexity. After its brief appearance in ads and trade show talk, the Action Game Master quietly vanished. No working prototype has ever been confirmed, and most historians believe it never got past the concept stage. Today, it's remembered as one of gaming's most ambitious, impractical, and completely unrealized console ideas. Taito WoW. In 1992, arcade giant Taito had an idea that was way ahead of its time, a home console capable of downloading full games through a satellite broadcast system. Named the Taito WoW, this machine promised to bring arcade-quality titles straight into living rooms without the need for physical cartridges or discs. It was an ambitious collaboration with Japanese satellite broadcaster WoW, aiming to merge high-end home gaming with instant content delivery, a concept that wouldn't become common until decades later. The WoW was designed to play standard game cartridges as well, but its real selling point was the satellite link. Players could subscribe to the WoW service and receive brand new games beamed directly to their consoles. For early 90s arcade fans, the idea of getting titles like Bubble Bobble or Darius delivered instantly was revolutionary. Unfortunately, technology and infrastructure just weren't ready. Satellite bandwidth was expensive, the required hardware wasn't common in homes, and consumer demand was uncertain. As development costs rose and the market shifted towards CD-based systems like the PlayStation and Sega Saturn, Taito canceled the project before launch. Today, the WoW remains a fascinating what if, a preview of digital distribution that arrived long before the world was ready. Ultravision Video Arcade System. In 1983, a small Florida-based company called Ultravision announced what they claimed would be the most versatile entertainment system ever made, the Video Arcade System, or VAS. Unlike other consoles of the time, the VAS wasn't just for gaming. It combined a full Atari 2600 compatible console, a ColecoVision compatible console, and a color television into one sleek unit. Even more ambitious, the company promised an optional computer module that would transform the VAS into a fully functional home computer. The concept was a gamer's dream. Play two of the biggest game libraries of the early 80s without owning multiple systems, all while saving space and cords by having it built into your TV. Ultravision showcased the system at the 1983 Consumer Electronics Show, generating a wave of curiosity from the press. But behind the scenes, the project was in trouble. Manufacturing such an all-in-one machine at a competitive price proved extremely difficult, and the company lacked the resources of bigger players like Atari or Coleco. When the video game market crashed later that year, investor confidence evaporated. The VAS never made it past the prototype stage, and Ultravision quickly disappeared from the industry. Today, it survives only in magazine ads and trade show photos, a relic of a bold but doomed idea. Which console would you have liked to see be released? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.